The night Lady Celestine Wycliffe died, the mountains tried to keep her husband from coming home. Snow struck Valebrook Castle like handfuls of shattered glass. Wind worried the ancient stones, rattled every casement, and drove white drifts against the doors. High in the eastern tower, Celestine lay beneath embroidered blankets while two candles bent their flames toward the darkened window. "Bring them to me," she whispered. Mrs. Fenwick hesitated beside the bed. "Your Grace, you must preserve your strength." "My children are my strength." 9-year-old Edmund entered first, trying to walk like the brave young heir everyone expected him to become. 7-year-old Clara followed, clutching a faded cloth doll. The moment they saw their mother's pallor, courage deserted them. They climbed onto the bed and pressed themselves against her, one beneath each arm. "Is Papa coming?" Clara asked. Celestine looked toward the storm. Duke Evander had ridden into the mountains hours earlier after a messenger claimed the physician was stranded beyond Raven Pass. No answer had returned from the signal towers. "He is fighting his way back," she said. "Your father has always fought hardest when love waits at the other end." Her breathing tightened, but she smiled until Clara's trembling eased. Then she reached beneath her pillow and withdrew a folded sheet, flour-stained and softened by years of use. Edmund frowned. "A recipe? The most important one I ever wrote." Across the top, in Celestine's graceful hand, were the words "The Hearthkeeper's Pie." Beneath them appeared 6 peculiar instructions: apples freely shared, rosemary gathered after hardship, honey given rather than sold, salt from another person's tears, a crust repaired after breaking, and an empty place left at its center. "One day," Celestine said, "your father may need someone beside him. So may you." Clara seized her hand. "We need you." "Oh, my darling." Pain crossed Celestine's face, yet her voice remained tender. "Love cannot always stay in the shape we first receive it. Sometimes it must leave a lantern behind and trust us to follow its light." She explained each ingredient: generosity, courage, kindness offered without reward, compassion for another person's sorrow, patience with wounded things, and love spacious enough to honor what came before it. "Do not choose beauty, wealth, or noble blood," she warned. "Choose the woman who is kind when she believes no important person is watching. Never trust anyone who asks about your father's title before asking about his heart." Edmund stared at the recipe until the letters blurred. "How will we know when we find her?" "You will see these qualities before she knows she is being observed. When one woman possesses them all, bake this pie and offer it to her." "To be our new mother?" Clara whispered. "Not a new mother. Another mother." Celestine touched the child's cheek. "Do not search for someone who wishes to replace me. Find the woman who leaves room for my memory while building something new beside it." A horn sounded faintly beyond the walls. "Papa!" Edmund cried. Hooves thundered across the courtyard. Evander came through the chamber door carrying the exhausted physician in his arms, snow whitening his black coat and dark hair. He stopped when he saw the stillness surrounding the bed. Celestine's gaze found him. Relief softened every trace of pain. "You came." Evander crossed the room and took her hand. "I will always come." She looked once at their children, once at him, and breathed his name as dawn silvered the windows. Then her fingers loosened. Evander bowed over her hand. The sound that escaped him seemed torn from the castle itself. Clara buried her face against Edmund, while Edmund folded the recipe and pushed it beneath his coat. At the funeral, Lady Isolde Harcourt watched him guarding that hidden place. Her elegant face held perfect sorrow, but her eyes measured every movement. Behind Isolde stood her father, Lord Garrick, his gloved hand resting on the children's shoulders with a pressure that felt less like comfort than possession, cold and deliberate. That night, Edmund awakened to drawers opening in the darkness. He shouted and the intruder fled. Servants found Celestine's belongings scattered across the nursery. Isolde appeared wearing a silk robe, murmuring concern, though melting snow shone beneath her slippers. Edmund searched his coat and turned pale. The recipe was gone. Clara quietly lifted her mother's cloth doll. "No," she whispered, touching its newly stitched seam. "I hid it here." Beyond the window, a shadow moved across the snow, and stopped beneath their light. By the first anniversary of Celestine's death, Valebrook Castle had forgotten the sound of laughter. Black draperies no longer covered its portraits, yet mourning lingered in the locked music room, the abandoned embroidery beside Celestine's chair, and the dining table where 3 people occupied places meant for 4. Duke Evander rarely noticed the silence. He rose before sunrise, governed until midnight, and slept in his study whenever exhaustion defeated him. Grief had not made him cruel. It had made him absent. Lady Isolde Harcourt entered the emptiness with graceful patience. She replaced servants loyal to Celestine, chose Clara's gowns, corrected Edmund's posture, and instructed the household to consult her before troubling the Duke. In public, she spoke tenderly of protecting Evander's motherless children. In private, every kindness carried the chill of ownership. Beyond the castle, winter exposed a darker wound. Relief wagons vanished between Valebrook and its mountain villages. Rents increased beneath orders bearing Evander's seal, although he had signed none. Families were driven from cottages while petitions disappeared from his desk. Lord Garrick Harcourt called the unrest unfortunate. The council requires stability, he told Evander. A widowed duke invites uncertainty. Mary Isolde and Valebrook will breathe easier. Evander's expression hardened. My people require food, not a wedding. Yet his investigation yielded only flawless accounts. Whoever was robbing Valebrook understood its machinery better than he did. Upstairs, Edmund and Clara pursued a different mystery. Clara unstitched the cloth doll and placed Celestine's recipe between them. We have waited a year, she said. Perhaps Papa's heart is already turning to stone. Edmund disliked the thought because it felt true. Their father still kissed their foreheads each night, but his gaze often seemed fixed upon someone standing behind them. We begin tomorrow, he decided. Wearing plain cloaks borrowed from the servants' laundry, they watched the women presented to Valebrook. Lady Beatrice distributed loaves outside the chapel, then slapped her maid for dropping a glove. A governess comforted Clara until she discovered the supposedly lost child belonged to a servant. Her tenderness disappeared instantly. Isolde gave coins before admiring guests but ordered a hungry boy removed when no noble eyes were watching. She failed mother's most important rule, Clara whispered. Days passed and every candidate failed. Each disappointment made the castle seem larger, colder, and determined to swallow their hope. Some possessed patience without compassion. Others displayed generosity only when rewarded by praise. Edmund began fearing Celestine's woman did not exist. One silver morning, the children followed the river beyond the village, searching for rosemary growing between the rocks. Meltwater rushed beneath shelves of ice, bright and swift. Clara leaned toward a green sprig. Stone crumbled beneath her boot. She fell into the stream with a cry. Edmund dropped to his knees, but the current spun her beyond his reach. Before he could shout again, a woman beside a wooden washtub abandoned an armful of linen and plunged into the water. She caught Clara against a boulder, fought through the current, and carried her onto the bank. The washerwoman was young, perhaps 28, with damp brown hair escaping a flowered headscarf. Her patched dress clung heavily to her knees, but her hands remained steady as she removed her shawl and wrapped it around Clara. "What possessed you to bring your sister here?" she demanded of Edmund. "I was protecting her." "Then protect her by remembering she is 7, not made of mountain iron." Clara coughed, frightened but unharmed. The woman's severity softened. She guided both children toward a riverside cabin, seated them beside the hearth, and divided her last piece of bread between them. "You are not eating," Clara noticed. "I ate earlier," the woman lied. Edmund saw the empty cupboard behind her. Shame warmed his face more sharply than the fire. He removed a silver coin from his pocket. "For the washing you lost." The woman closed his fingers around it. "Kindness that demands payment is only business wearing a gentler dress." Celestine's words seemed to breathe inside the room. "What is your name?" Clara asked. "Mara Bellrose." Edmund exchanged a startled glance with his sister. They had found generosity and kindness before learning where Mara lived. After escorting them toward the village, Mara returned to the stream. A square of white linen lay trapped between 2 stones. She lifted it and saw Celestine's initials beneath the embroidered Wycliffe crest. Her expression changed. Years earlier, that crest had sealed the accusation that destroyed Dr. Elias Bellrose, stripped Mara of her home, and sent her father to his grave beneath the name of thief. She stared toward the road where the children had vanished. Whatever warmth they had awakened closed behind an old, iron door. Mara crushed the handkerchief in her fist. "No Wycliffe," she whispered, "will ever be welcome beneath my roof." 3 mornings later, Mara found the Wycliffe children standing outside her cabin with Celestine's handkerchief folded between Edmund's hands. "You left before we could thank you," Clara said. "I remember refusing payment." "This is not payment." Edmund offered the linen. "It belonged to our mother." Mara regarded the embroidered crest as if it carried poison. "I know." Her answer should have ended the visit. Then a wagon creaked along the riverside track, crowded with tenant families wrapped in threadbare blankets. They had been expelled from their cottages before sunrise. Mara's anger shifted away from the children. She carried out a basket containing 8 winter apples. Clara watched her place one into every pair of waiting hands. When only a bruised apple remained, Mara gave it to a barefoot boy and returned with an empty basket. "Those were all you had," Edmund said. "Hunger does not become smaller because it belongs to someone else." Clara touched her brother's sleeve. "Apples freely shared. The first ingredient." Their impossible search suddenly felt possible. Mara noticed their glance. "What mischief are you planning?" "Nothing wicked," Clara promised. Despite herself, Mara admitted them. Their visits continued through the week. She taught Edmund to mend a torn cuff with stitches strong enough to survive work, not merely inspection. She showed Clara which mountain herbs eased fever and which beautiful berries must never be touched. More importantly, she made them listen when villagers spoke. "People in castles hear echoes," she told them. "They mistake those echoes for the whole valley." Edmund asked why she hated Valebrook. Mara's needle stopped. Her father, Dr. Elias Bellrose, had served every village regardless of payment. During an epidemic, crates of medicine vanished from the estate stores. Lord Garrick accused Elias of selling them. Documents bearing the ducal seal supported the charge. Neighbors who once trusted him crossed the road to avoid his shadow. "Our home was seized," Mara said. "My father died with thief attached to his name. Valebrook took everything except my memory of the truth." Neither child defended the castle. Their silence unsettled her more than excuses would have. Evander, meanwhile, discovered 4 missed lessons and mud on Clara's boots. Fearing danger, he followed them the next afternoon without guards. Their path led him beyond the prosperous village square into a settlement of roofless cottages he had never been shown. A rent collector waited beside Mara's cabin. His horse towered over an elderly widow clutching an eviction notice. "Magistrate's order," he announced. "Leave by sunset." "The seal is blurred," Mara said. "The rent figure has been altered." "Move aside, washerwoman." He urged his horse forward. Mara planted herself in the road, gripping her wooden washing paddle. She looked fragile beneath the animal's broad chest, yet she did not retreat. "You will ride over me before you throw her into the snow." The collector raised his crop. "Lower that." Evander's voice cut across the river. He stepped from the trees, his black coat stark against the snow. The collector blanched, muttered an apology, and fled with the notice still in Mara's hand. Clara ran to her father. Edmund remained beside Mara, as though uncertain which adult needed protection. "You followed them," Mara said. "They are my children. And those people are yours as well." She pointed toward the dispossessed families. "Yet you required your children to show you where they live." Evander absorbed the rebuke without reaching for rank. "I never authorized these evictions." "Then someone steals beneath your name while you grieve behind stone walls." Her cruelty struck accurately because it contained truth. "You presume much about a man you have never met." "I met your seal before I met you. It destroyed my father." Recognition crossed Evander's face. "Bellrose? Do not pretend surprise repairs a grave. I saw evidence against him." "You saw what Garrick wanted you to see." The river rushed between their words. Evander studied Mara, the patched sleeves, the paddle held like a sword, the fierce intelligence no poverty had erased. She saw a powerful man who appeared wounded rather than offended, and hated that this complicated her judgment. "I will examine the case," he said. "You should examine your entire valley." That evening, Evander demanded every relief account and eviction order issued during Celestine's illness. Garrick received the request with a smile, then sent a message to Isolde. The washerwoman had become dangerous. After midnight, Isolde's maid entered the nursery with a copied key. She removed Celestine's cloth doll, cut open its seam and carried the recipe to Isolde's chamber. Isolde held the paper above a candle, expecting childish instructions. Heat awakened pale letters hidden between the lines. Her smile vanished as Celestine's final warning darkened across the page. "If I die before the truth is known, Garrick Harcourt must never control my children." Isolde hid Celestine's recipe inside her writing desk, but stealing the paper could not stop its instructions from unfolding across Valebrook. The next morning, Edmund and Clara found Mara preparing medicine for a feverish child. Her rosemary jar was empty. Fresh sprigs grew above the river on a ledge made treacherous by ice. "I can fetch it," Edmund offered. "You can remain here and keep the fire alive." Mara climbed alone. Wind pulled at her skirt while loose stones rattled into the gorge. She returned with bleeding knuckles, a fistful of rosemary and no thought of praise. Courage after hardship, Clara whispered. Before sunset, Mara boiled the herb with the last honey in her cupboard. When the child's mother offered payment, Mara refused. Honey given rather than sold, Edmund murmured. They saw compassion 2 days later. A tenant named Mrs. Vale arrived after losing her husband. During the Bellrose scandal, she had called Mara's father a murderer before the entire village. Mara remembered every word. Still, she sat beside the grieving woman, accepted her tears without accusation, and remained until sorrow loosened its grip. Outside, Clara touched the small pouch of salt she carried. She has almost everything. Only patience with something broken remained, and neither child knew that grief itself was already preparing the final test for her. The final test came through no design of theirs. Clara brought Celestine's treasured pie dish to Mara's cabin, hoping to measure its depth. Her sleeve caught the handle. The dish struck the floor and broke into 5 pieces. Clara froze. Then grief overtook her. It was Mama's. Mara knelt among the fragments. Then we shall treat it as something loved, not something ruined. With wire, tiny metal clasps and patient hands she joined the pieces. The cracks remained visible, silvered like narrow rivers beneath the glaze. Broken things do not become worthless, Mara said. Sometimes the repair is where their strength begins. Evander stood outside the open door, unheard. He had come carrying forged eviction orders for Mara to examine. Instead, he watched Clara place the repaired dish against her heart. For a year, he had believed his children needed protection from grief. Mara understood they needed permission to carry it. Something guarded inside him shifted. Their investigation drew them together. Mara recognized inconsistencies in the relief accounts because her father had taught her bookkeeping. Evander traced copied seals across 6 villages. Suspicion repeatedly led toward Garrick, but every decisive document had vanished. At the river, Evander attempted to help wash linen while questioning tenants. He poured excessive lye into a tub and turned a nobleman's white shirt yellow. Edmund laughed so violently he dropped the account ledger. Clara's laughter followed, bright enough to make Evander close his eyes. Mara saw grief cross his face. Does their happiness hurt you? Only because Celestine should hear it. Perhaps loving what remains is another way of carrying what was lost. That night, Mara discovered Evander repairing a displaced family's roof beneath freezing rain. He had removed his fine coat, concealed his title, and worked until the children inside were warm. For the first time she saw a man striving to deserve power rather than merely possess it. Isolde struck before trust could deepen. During market day she arrived surrounded by noble guests and accused Mara of enticing the Duke through his children. Her voice was velvet, her cruelty needed no volume. She rescues Clara, befriends Edmund, then discovers corruption only she can explain. How convenient. Whispers spread. People who had accepted Mara's apples avoided her eyes. Garrick displayed records declaring Dr. Bellrose guilty of stealing medicine. At the bottom stood Celestine's unmistakable signature. Evander read the document twice. This is her hand. Mara waited for him to reject it. His silence lasted only seconds, but she had spent years being condemned within shorter moments. You promised to seek truth, she said. I am seeking it. No. You are deciding whether your dead Duchess can be honorable only if my father was not. He reached toward her. Mara stepped back. Leave my cabin. Mara, the signature may be copied. Then you should have said that before doubt spoke through your face. Evander departed carrying the terrible knowledge that hesitation could wound as sharply as judgment. After darkness fell, Edmund slipped from the castle. He believed Dr. Bellrose's remaining journals could prove the signature false. A narrow light burned inside Mara's wooden storehouse as he searched its shelves. Outside, a figure poured lamp oil across the threshold and fastened a chain around the doors. Mara awakened to an orange glare against her window. Flames climbed the storehouse walls, devouring the records that had survived her family's disgrace. Then, above the river and the roar of burning timber, she heard Edmund screaming her name from inside. Mara reached the storehouse before fear could tell her the flames were impossible. She wrapped a wet blanket around herself and struck the chain door with her washing paddle. Metal screamed but held. Through a smoke-clouded window, Edmund appeared between blazing shelves, clutching several journals beneath his coat. Leave the books. Mara shouted. They prove your father was innocent. You are worth more than every truth in that room. She shattered the window, climbed through, and pulled him beneath the blanket. Burning timber blocked the door, forcing them toward the rear wall. Edmund stumbled, yet Mara kept one arm around him and followed the strip of cold air entering beneath a narrow window. Outside, hoofbeats struck the frozen road. Evander had discovered Edmund missing and followed his tracks from the castle. He saw Mara lift his son toward the opening while the roof groaned above them. Evander tore away the window frame. Edmund emerged first. Mara pushed the journals after him, but before she could climb through, part of a shelf collapsed across her path. Evander reached inside. "Take my hand." Only hours earlier she had ordered him away. Now his voice contained no hesitation. Mara seized his wrist, and he pulled her through as the roof folded inward behind them. Clara arrived in a servant's cart and threw herself against her brother. Evander knelt before Edmund, furious relief shaking his words. "Never enter a burning building for papers." Edmund looked toward Mara. "Nobody believed her father. I thought evidence mattered most. No truth purchased with your life is justice." Mara heard the answer Evander had failed to give in the marketplace. Something wounded between them remained, but it was no longer beyond repair. Near the chain door, Evander found spilled oil and a fragment of dark wool. The fire had been deliberate. Whoever started it feared not only Mara's evidence but Edmund's loyalty to her. Most journals were damaged. One page, protected inside Edmund's coat, remained legible. It recorded medicine transferred from village stores under Garrick's authority, followed by payments to a palace servant identified only as F. Beside the entry, Dr. Bellrose had written, "Ask Celestine before they silence the accounts." Evander's face hardened. "You and the children are coming to Valebrook." Mara resisted until she saw someone watching from the trees. Protection did not feel like surrender when Edmund and Clara were also threatened. Isolde welcomed Mara into the castle with a smile polished for witnesses. Before nightfall, rumors claimed the washerwoman had arranged the fire to make herself indispensable. At dinner, noble guests examined Mara as though poverty were contagious. Lady Ashcombe lifted her wineglass. "Will you wash our tablecloths after you become Duchess, Miss Bellrose?" Mara folded her napkin. "Gladly, once your family pays the 11 laundresses still awaiting last winter's wages." Silence struck the table. Another gentleman laughed until Mara named the stonecutters he owed. She left without lowering her head. Evander followed her into the gallery. "I should have stopped them sooner." "Yes." Her directness denied him comfortable forgiveness. "I hesitated over Celestine's signature because grief made me afraid of what truth might demand. Courage arriving late still leaves someone wounded." "I know." He did not defend himself. "I will spend whatever time remains proving that I know." His humility reached where apology alone could not. Mara's anger did not disappear, but it made room for uncertainty. Mrs. Fenwick found Mara before dawn and led her into the abandoned pastry room. The cook locked the door before speaking. Her Grace suspected Garrick months before she died. Relief ledgers vanished. Messages were altered. Dr. Bellrose tried to warn her. Mara showed her the payment marked F. Mrs. Fenwick recoiled. "They want you to believe it means Fenwick." "Does it?" "No. It belongs to someone who entered the Duchess's chamber whenever she pleased." "Who?" Footsteps paused outside. The handle turned. Mrs. Fenwick pushed Mara through a pantry passage. "Go. I will find you when it is safe." By breakfast the cook had disappeared. Isolde claimed Mrs. Fenwick had retired, but her spectacles lay near an open servant's door, half covered by snow. Edmund and Clara searched Isolde's rooms while she attended chapel. On her bed lay Celestine's cloth doll, its stitched body cut open. Clara lifted it with trembling hands. She found the recipe. Edmund examined Isolde's writing desk. Flour dusted its polished surface, and beside it rested a silver pie server engraved with the Wycliffe crest. The recipe itself was gone. Then the castle bells rang, summoning every servant to the great hall. Isolde stood beneath Celestine's portrait holding a sealed announcement. "In 7 days," she declared, "I shall bake the late Duchess's Hearthkeeper's pie and fulfill her final wish." Clara clutched the wounded doll. "She is going to make Mother's promise into a lie." Within hours, Isolde's announcement traveled farther than any petition from the starving villages. Invitations promised a winter banquet honoring Celestine's final wish. Nobles descended upon Valebrook with trunks, jewels, and appetites. Garrick told the royal council that Evander would announce his engagement after Isolde presented the Hearthkeeper's pie. "I promised no such thing," Evander said. Garrick smiled. "Refusing before witnesses would dishonor your wife's memory." The trap was not hidden. It was decorated with silver candlesticks. Evander recognized the cruelty. Garrick intended to make resistance appear faithless and obedience appear like devotion before everyone. In the castle kitchen, Isolde treated Celestine's recipe as a catalogue of luxuries. Imported apples replaced fruit shared by villagers. She threatened to dismiss the beekeeper unless he surrendered his finest honey. Servants were ordered to discard every imperfect crust. The late Duchess valued excellence, Isolde declared. Watching from the passage, Edmund understood what she had missed. Celestine had never cared what the ingredients cost. She cared how they were given. "We must bake the true pie," he told Clara. They carried the repaired dish into the valley beneath a blanket. At the widow's cottage, 2 apples were freely offered. The beekeeper contributed honey he had hidden from Isolde. Mrs. Vale gave rosemary gathered after mourning her husband. A laborer whose family Mara had protected brought salt wrapped in paper. Each gift carried a story of Mara's kindness. By dusk, the children possessed everything except certainty. "What if she does not want us?" Clara asked. Edmund looked at the empty heart they had pressed into the crust. "Then we shall love her without making her stay." While the pie baked in the village oven, Mara studied her father's surviving ledger page. A faded line referenced water channels beneath Valebrook's chapel. Dr. Bellrose had once treated laborers who repaired them. Evander found a concealed lever behind the chapel altar. Stone shifted, revealing steps descending into darkness. "You should remain above," he told Mara. "My father's map is in my head. And danger appears wherever these records lead. Then stop asking me to stand behind you." Evander took a lantern. "Beside me then." The passage narrowed beneath the castle. Water whispered behind its walls. They reached a locked storeroom and heard a faint voice within. Mrs. Fenwick lay imprisoned but conscious, surrounded by dusty flour barrels. Behind her, concealed beneath a false floor, were relief ledgers and bundles of Celestine's letters. One letter named Garrick. Another described medicine disappearing during the epidemic. Celestine had discovered that Frances Vale, Isolde's maid, intercepted correspondence and altered her treatments under Garrick's instructions, keeping her weak enough that her accusations sounded confused. Dr. Bellrose had uncovered the theft first. Garrick forged the evidence against him, seized his property, and redirected suspicion before Elias could reach Evander. Isolde protected the conspiracy because marriage would give her control of Valebrook. Mara held the page clearing her father's name, but triumph would not come. He died believing truth had abandoned him. Evander's answer was quiet. "Then we will carry it home for him." A stone door slammed behind them. Garrick's voice traveled through the wall. "Celestine should have let the dead remain useful." Water burst from an open channel, flooding the chamber. Evander attacked the sealed door while Mara searched her memory. The water climbed from their ankles to their knees. Mrs. Fenwick could barely stand. The lantern flickered. "My father drew an emergency drain," Mara said. "Behind the northern stones. They found an iron wheel beneath the rising surface. It would not turn." "Take Fenwick to the steps," Evander ordered. "There are no steps left." Mara entered the current and braced both hands against the wheel. Evander joined her. Together they forced it once, twice, then heard rust break with a sharp crack. The drainage gate opened. Water dragged at Mara's skirt and pulled her from her footing. Evander caught her hand before the current carried her toward the channel. "Do not release me," she gasped. "I have already learned what hesitation costs." They held fast until the chamber emptied. Behind the iron wheel, a maintenance tunnel led upward into the chapel crypt. They emerged soaked, supporting Mrs. Fenwick and carrying Celestine's evidence inside Evander's coat. Music trembled through the floor above them. The banquet had begun. In the great hall, Isolde's perfect pie waited beneath a silver cover. Garrick stood beside her, unaware that the documents capable of destroying him had escaped the flood. Evander searched the glittering crowd. "Where are the children?" A servant hurried forward, breathless. "Your Grace, Lord Edmund and Lady Clara left through the lower gate. They were carrying a pie toward the river." Mara looked toward the dark windows. Far below the castle, 2 small figures were disappearing into the falling snow, bearing Celestine's final promise between them. Isolde lifted the silver cover, and applause rolled through Valebrook's great hall. Her pie appeared flawless, gilded leaves, jeweled fruit, and an unbroken crust surrounding a perfect crown. Beneath Celestine's portrait, Isolde smiled as though the dead Duchess had surrendered her place. "This recipe was entrusted to the woman meant to restore this family," she announced. "Tonight, Duke Evander shall honor that choice." The doors opened before Garrick could summon him. Edmund and Clara entered carrying a smaller pie in Celestine's repaired dish. Snow dampened their plain cloaks. Flour marked Clara's cheek and a crack crossed the crust, mended with a narrow braid of pastry. At its center remained an empty heart. Isolde's smile tightened. "Put that childish mess away." Edmund faced the gathered nobles. "Your apples were purchased from strangers. Your honey was taken through fear. Nothing in your pie means what Mother intended." Clara looked up at Celestine's portrait. Mama did not ask for perfection. Without waiting for permission, the children turned and walked from the hall. Evander emerged from the chapel passage with Mara and Mrs. Fenwick. Water streamed from his coat. Celestine's letters rested against his heart. He saw the disappearing children, then Isolde beside her counterfeit promise. "Follow them," he ordered. Not only servants obeyed. Villagers moved first, followed by councilmen and nobles drawn by the possibility of scandal. The procession descended through falling snow until music and candlelight vanished behind them. At the river, Mara stopped beside her overturned washtub. She had come to collect her few possessions, believing Valebrook would never permit her peace after Isolde's banquet. Edmund and Clara approached, holding the pie between them. "We made this pie for our mother," they said. Mara covered her mouth. For one suspended moment, the river, crowd, and snow seemed to disappear. She knelt before them. "I love you both, but I cannot replace Celestine." Edmund's solemn face softened. "That is why we chose you. Mother said the right woman would never try." Clara pointed to the empty heart in the crust. "That place will always belong to her. You can have the place beside it." The words broke something open in Mara, not because they offered her a title, but because they offered belonging without demanding her erasure. Evander stood behind his children, silent until Mara lifted her gaze. Then he stepped forward. "I have commanded people all my life," he said. "I will not command you. But if you permit it, my children and I would like to earn a place in yours." Mara's answer trembled at the edge of speech. Hooves thundered across the bridge. Garrick arrived with armed officers, Isolde beside him. "Arrest that woman," Garrick commanded. "She abducted the Duke's heirs and manipulated them using a stolen family document." Isolde displayed Celestine's recipe. She learned every test and performed it deliberately. "She never saw the recipe," Edmund said. "You stole it from us." Garrick signaled the officers forward. "Stand down," Evander ordered. He opened Celestine's letters. Before nobles, villagers, and council representatives, he read her account of missing relief wagons, forged seals, and Dr. Bellrose's warning. He produced the ledgers recovered beneath the chapel. Mrs. Fenwick identified the storeroom where Garrick imprisoned her. Then Frances Vale pushed through the crowd, her face stripped of loyalty. "Lord Garrick promised protection," she confessed. "I intercepted Celestine's letters and altered her medicine. When suspicion grew, he ordered me to place everything upon Mrs. Fenwick." Garrick called her a liar, but the officers had already begun examining his signature. The villagers surrounded Mara, not as a shield of violence but as witnesses. The widow described the apples. The beekeeper spoke of freely given honey. Families named the roofs Mara repaired, the medicine she shared, and the dignity she preserved when Valebrook abandoned them. A councilman raised Dr. Bellrose's ledger. "Elias Bellrose was innocent. His name shall be restored." Mara closed her eyes. Vindication arrived years too late for her father, yet not too late to rescue his memory. The officers arrested Garrick. Isolde's elegance fractured as the stolen recipe was taken from her hands. She had desired Valebrook's title and lost even the respect of its poorest villagers. Evander turned to Mara before the watching valley. Emotion overcame caution. "Marry me." Mara looked at the children, the pie, and the man who had finally defended the truth. Then she shook her head. "I will not enter your family as payment for suffering, nor because gratitude resembles love tonight. If you want my answer, earn it when no crowd is watching." She cut the pie into 4 pieces. Clara received the first, Edmund the second. Mara lifted the third onto her own plate. The fourth remained before Evander, untouched. "A safe heart cannot merely be found," she told him. "It must also be proven." Evander did not touch the 4th piece of pie that night. He left it beneath Mara's window and returned to the village, not with flowers or another proposal, but with the ledgers of every family Garrick had dispossessed. Spring reached Valebrook slowly. As snow withdrew from the valley, Evander restored stolen relief funds, returned cottages to their owners, and dismissed every official who had profited from silence. Garrick's abandoned manor became a free infirmary bearing the name Dr. Elias Bellrose. Above its entrance, Mara watched workmen carve the letters her father had died believing no honorable wall would carry. Evander asked for nothing in return. He moved from the castle into the village steward's cottage while the investigation continued. He repaired fences, delivered medicines, and listened to complaints without servants filtering the painful parts. When Mara found him rebuilding her porch, one railing leaned badly enough to resemble a fallen tree. "You govern mountains," she observed, "yet a straight piece of wood defeats you. Mountains rarely offer instructions." She took the hammer and stood beside him. Their shoulders nearly touched, but neither hurried the moment. Trust did not return like lightning. It arrived like spring water, quietly filling places winter had emptied. Edmund and Clara stopped testing Mara. Clara learned to prepare fever remedies at the new infirmary. Edmund opened a village library inside Dr. Bellrose's restored house. Evander came each evening, sometimes carrying accounts, sometimes flour, and occasionally another crooked repair requiring Mara's rescue. One rainy afternoon, Clara placed Celestine's recipe beside the hearth to dry. Pale writing appeared along its browned edge. "Papa," she called. Evander read the hidden line aloud. "My beloved Evander, I did not choose your next wife. I only taught our children to recognize a safe heart. The choice and the courage must be yours." Another sentence emerged beneath it. "The qualities they seek must first be found within you, or you will not deserve the woman who carries them." Evander lowered the page. Celestine had not created an examination solely for another mother. She had left a path for the husband grief might harden. Generosity, courage, kindness, compassion, patience, and love that honored the past. He understood why Mara had left his pie untouched. The final test had always belonged to him. At the spring festival, Valebrook gathered beside the sapphire lake. Evander approached Mara without witnesses arranged for spectacle. He carried no jewels. He gave her the restored deed to her father's house. "It is yours whether you choose me or never welcome me across its threshold," he said. Justice should not arrive disguised as courtship. Mara examined the seal. For years, powerful people had offered kindness carrying invisible chains. Evander's gift demanded nothing. "You finally learned," she whispered. "I am still learning." She looked toward Edmund and Clara, who were pretending not to watch. Then she returned the deed to Evander long enough to take his hand. "My answer is yes." The children's shout startled birds from the reeds. Mara refused a palace ceremony. She wanted their wedding where Valebrook's villagers could stand beside them, not below them. On a morning, flower-covered boats crossed the lake toward a small green island at its center. Apple blossoms drifted across the water. Rosemary crowned the wooden landing and ribbons danced between the birches. Edmund carried Celestine's repaired pie dish. Clara scattered petals before Mara, who wore an ivory gown sewn by the village women. Evander waited in a simple black coat, smiling without sorrow concealing itself behind the expression. Beside him stood an empty chair decorated with Celestine's favorite white roses. Mara paused before it, then laid one apple blossom upon the seat. She did not replace the woman who had been lost. She honored her before beginning something new beside her memory. Evander and Mara exchanged vows surrounded by mountains, water, and the people whose trust they had earned. When they kissed, the village bells rang, their sound traveling across the lake like joy finally finding its way home. They returned to the village in one boat, Evander rowing, Mara beside him, and both children laughing between them. That evening, Mara discovered Edmund and Clara in her restored kitchen, flour covering the table. Another misshapen pie cooled in Celestine's mended dish. "Who is this one for?" Mara asked. Clara smiled. "The first pie helped us find a mother. This one is because we already have her." Evander entered with flour across his black coat and the untouched fourth piece preserved beneath a glass cover. "I believe this belongs to me now," he said. Mara divided the new pie into 4 equal pieces. No portion remained untouched, though the empty heart stayed within the crust. Evander stepped forward as he had beside the river. This time Mara was already holding out her hand.